Hello everyone, and welcome my friends to our Jesus Meets Aristotle online series of lectures on philosophy, ancient Greek and contemporary, and the Gospel of Jesus Christ. As you might remember from the introductory part of our series, this is just a group of friends that I would be more than happy to lead in some discussions, some lectures, some ideas of how to enhance, promote, prolong, and practice critical thinking. Reasons for it? Many of those, and hopefully we will see and develop some of them as we move along. But I wanted to begin with something that some of you might know very well, some of you might admire or listen to on your headphones. Year of the Lord, Anno Domini 1965, was a very good year, for many reasons. Not only because my parents met on their first date, not only because then later, several years after that, they decided to have family, hello! But also 1965 was a very good year because a fantastic group released their album with beautiful song, Turn, Turn, Turn. It was the Birds. And many of you might remember that song. There is a time to be born and there is a time to die. There's a time for laughter, there's a time for crying. And turn, 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 a little tambourine man, that's another one. You remember those, right? Definitely, rightly so. Beautiful, beautiful music of the 60s. But you see, when you look deeper, those words from the Birds' turn, turn, turn come to us from a very ancient source. They are part of, when we open that book, it says Verba Ecclesiaste, Filii David, Regis Jerusalem, Vanitas vanitatis, dixit Ecclesiaste, vanitas vanitatem et omnia vanitas. Debari recollect ben David, Havel Havelim, says Cohilet, the son of David. Vapor, vanity, all life is vanity, and no matter what you do, it's doomed, like chaff on the wind, to vanish. If that's not philosophy, what else is, my friends? Just to give you some examples of how even the rock band from the 60s can go hand in hand with the ancient Jewish book from the Old Testament of so-called the book of the prophet, or Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, known in the English-speaking world. And you see, we can talk also about another year of the Lord, Anno Domini 1543. Why that year was important and still is? For 1001 reasons. But that one reason, it is important for many of us, and we can find common denominator why, is because it was the year when a wonderful polymath, genius, countryman, Nicolaus Copernicus, died. And it was after he died that his famous book, De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, might be translated into English, On Revolving of Heavenly Spheres, was published. He knew better to publish that book only after he kicks the bucket. Because if not, he will be like Giordano Bruno or many others, put in house arrest and maybe even persecuted. Heliocentric theory changed everything from the ancient times into modernity. Copernicus's idea that Earth our planet, is not the center of the world and the universe, and planets, sun, stars, and everything else revolves around it, was not new. Many before him thought that, but he put it on writing and proved it with his calculations and observations. He published it, or it was published only after he has died, only because at those times, real medieval times, before the Renaissance of Europe in Catholic Church, certain ideas were rather stiff. You couldn't pass through or go through them. And we call that moment that heliocentric theory, that Earth revolves around the sun, our daily star. Now in the history of human thought is known as Copernican Revolution in sciences, or in general, Copernican Revolution. My friends, and then speaking of philosophy, we can also talk about Copernican Revolution in philosophy, something that redefined the ancient way of thinking about stuff, about me as a being, ontology, about things before me, in other words, metaphysics, like Aristotle puts it, entire volume of work, studies, in I believe 14 books that precede, are before physics, studies about the physical world, we call it metaphysics. It changes methods of critical thinking, that Copernican revolution in philosophy, and since then changes the coherence, coexistence of religion and philosophy, religion and science going into the modern world. Copernican revolution in philosophy happened through and with three very simple yet now famous questions that the gentleman by the name Immanuel, his family name Kant, who lived his entire life in Königsberg, Królewicz, what today is in part of Russia called Kaliningrad, in what was back then called Prussia, part of the German Empire in the 18th century. And Immanuel, that great philosopher, asked those questions simply because his own critical thinking led him to discover some inconsistencies, incoherence, bifurcation, disjunction in the old philosophical systems going back to ancient Greece. And he asked very humbly yet very famously and powerfully those three questions that changed everything. Question number one was, what can I know? And that question he elaborated on in the book that otherwise is very boring, very thick, long, large, and yet extremely difficult. And then he called that book Critical of Judgment. What can I know as a human being? Can I know things within themselves, or just I know things as they appear to me? His second question was also very simple when you think about this, but yet loaded, heavy. How can I know it? And he elaborated on that question, how can I know stuff, which is methodology, epistemology, the method, how do I know stuff, things, in the book that now we know in English translation as the Critique of Pure Reason. How my mind, brain, works to discover things. And the third question that Immanuel asked was a most sublime, yet impacting everyone else even today. It has to do with ethics, with moral thinking, conduct, understanding. What should I do? And then he elaborated on this one in this book that now is translated as Critique of Pure Practical Reason. Practically, what should I do to achieve those previous goals? With its imperative, categorical imperative, that famous statement that, morally we should do only when it serves the good of everybody. Even one person falls off the parenthesis, we shouldn't do such action if it hurts only one of 100%. That's idealism. That's why we call his way of thinking critical idealism. But then yet Immanuel Kant came up with or developed upon the concept that thing within itself, thing, any given thing, any given it, noumenon, from the Greek word for knows, mind, my mind, is beyond really our experience, our cognitive abilities, our thinking. Things only appear to us, phenomenon. They are phenomenons. They appear to us, and we can know them by their appearances. To know something within itself, what it is for real, it's much more complex process. And therefore, you see, that's the essence, that's the key to understand Immanuel Kant's Copernican Revolution in philosophy. He switched the way ancient and modern into contemporary philosophers before him, and many after him still do that, but before him used to think. Immanuel Kant says that our consciousness, our subjective experience, our mind makes our senses, all the sensory wiring in our body, our experience, active, very active agents in epistemological experience. In other words, in process of knowing, through categories that we are wired with, we have built in our minds. And we can elaborate on it as we may be in next of the sessions, next of the philosophy talks. We'll compare this critical, immanent idealism to the absolute idealism of Wilhelm Hegel, who lived at about the same time as Immanuel Kant. But those two schools of idealism, Hegel's and Kant's, are very different. And then they both affect us as persons of faith and critical thinkers. You see, this one, Copernican Revolution, in the way Immanuel Kant shows us how we should think to withdraw, discover the thing for real, for what it is, not only judging it by the book by the cover as they appear to us, phenomenon, appearances. That process involves our active homework. You see, the categories that Kant says we might have even innate, built in our apparatus, in our hardware, not necessarily even software. He says maybe the category of beauty, goodness, morality. Those, you see, as we mentioned in the beginning, in our introduction, play on the idea, how could I know something without first experiencing it in the laboratory? In other words, how are synthetic judgments a priori? A priori means judgment, understanding, adjudication, preassumption, before experience, and how this can be real, how this can be true, how can I prove it? In opposition to elementary analytic judgments a posteriori, after experience. I go to the lab, do experience to prove my theory, and only then I can say something is true. 2 and 2 equals 4. When I actually add 2 parts to 2 parts of something and see the result. How do I know before adding it? How do I know that? Only because someone told me, who was my teacher, professor, great mathematician, now, in my high school, or 100 years ago, or 2 millennia ago. Is this valid knowledge? Should I myself jump into the field and experience it? And you see, my friends, the way German philosopher presents us with the way of making this anthropocentric turn from theocentric medieval studies, in other words, looking closely maybe onto subject of the philosophical or scientific experience instead of the object, which is ultimately this or that, or God, is that part of Copernican Revolution, completely changing the way we think about ourselves. From insignificance in this vast God's ordeal to significance. I matter. Even my mind takes active part in the process of knowing. You see, and the difference between that form of idealism with absolute idealism of Hegel is mind is an active in the process of knowing. But is it creative? Does it create realities that exist? Even on philosophical, on ontological, metaphysical level? Maybe absolute idealism of Hegel would say yes. Everything, even God and history, is created by our mind. But what would Immanuel says is, I don't know. And maybe we should pursue it. Because if that's true, my friends, if your brain, my brain, if your mind, my mind, is more than an active object and subject of philosophical inquiry, if it has creative powers, if it can create something maybe out of non-existence, show me something that you can easily think of. Square circle. Show me one. Does it exist? And you see, that's why, long before German genius from Prussia, from Königsberg, philosophers, even of scholastic times, with Enzo, with maybe Albertus Magnus, Albert the Great, St. Thomas most of all, of Aquino, Thomas Aquinas, they will be all, to some extent, modifying and trying to understand Platonic and Aristotelian philosophical systems, philosophies, to speak about the experience of faith and God, or experience in the world, after all, through the lenses of faith and philosophy in coherent and understandable language. And maybe that is why, when scholastic philosophy says that I am important in all this process of understanding, epistemology, but I am just little creation in that beautiful universe that the omnipotent, ever-living, maybe ever-distant, maybe ever-close, but infinite God, that I can maybe, as Thomas says, even prove his existence through 5 ways of saying what he is not. You know, quinque vie, 5 ways, or those proofs of Thomas for the existence of God are negative. It's via negativa, the negative way of saying what God is not. Therefore, what we think, who we think God is much more than what he is not, you see. We can't comprehend it ever. And then yet, human spirit, human nature, you and I, because we have that inquisitive gene in our chromosomal material, we do question, we do ask the question, why? And then starting with this idea, which is only a glimpse, a brush of German idealism and Copernican Revolution in philosophy through Immanuel Kant, I hope you see, my friends, that before we even dive deeper, it would be very beneficial for us when we talk, and that's going to be the second half of this part of this talk, about maybe the definition or vision of human person, human being, human nature. Because to philosophize, to go deeper into, I don't know, epistemology, metaphysics, ontology, philosophy of mind, religion, what have you, we need to know ourselves better first, and maybe find common ground, common denominator of why we call ourselves the way we do, why we can start with, begin with, maybe acknowledging that we believe we belong to the same family of Homo sapiens sapiens, thinking beings, but we are much more than that, not reducible to the particular parts that create that large family of people, persons. Should we call ourselves a person? What is the difference between human being or human nature and human person? Why person, persona, word itself borrowed or translated from ancient wise Greeks stand for mask. Masks that actors would wear while performing beautiful Oedipus or Antigona. Greek tragedies where blood was flowing or spreading terribly. Those tragedies, ancient Greek tragedies, you all read some of them. Why? I think it would be very helpful for us to understand or look into, my friends, what creates a person. What makes you and I a person on top of being human being, human nature. Maybe we can look at or at it or develop it from three ways, three perspectives. First, the easiest one, I think, because you all studied it or actively are studying, if you are a younger generation, in your schools. From, I believe, 5th or 6th grade, when you did have your biology classes with anatomy, physiognomy, and maybe a little bit of the chemistry later on in high school, we all can say few things about ourselves from scientific perspective. Science is that branch or man in the bush, branch tree of knowledge that is divided into so many subcategories. But generically, I think we can see how we, us human beings, are understood from the scientific perspective from ancient Greeks, ancient times, in different perspectives. Pre-Socratic, pre-Plato and Aristotle Greeks, from the 6th and 5th centuries before Jesus, used to think maybe, and we have perfect examples of them like Thales or Democritus, that were nothing else but matter, atoms. That's why we call them materialists or monists or atomists. Nothing else there. You are born, you kick the bucket, you die, we spread your ashes all over the beautiful turquoise sea around the Greek Isles, and that's it. But you see, Aristotle and his philosophical school says a little bit more about the experience of me. Aristotle and his school will try to maybe reason that although I belong to the world of nature, I am alike other animals, nature around me, I can distinguish easily in me and others few categories that escape science, like matter, of course, morphe, his helomorphic theory, helomorphism, matter, what am I built of, and form, the way I'm built of, that is eventually a substance, essence, me, what makes me, that Aristotle calls, and many after him, animal rationale, rational animal, animal with the brain, with the ability to think. Fair enough, I think, on some level. And then zooming or speeding in the time machine to contemporary sciences, ever since the Darwinian proof of Mendelian chromosomal modifications and replications, you see, we understand rather clearly that the smallest parts of who we are, building blocks, our genetic materials, it's such a large domino that changing one sequence of it would determine outcome for generations. And that is why maybe scientists, people who do not apply faith and religion to understanding of who we are would like to see us as human beings, not necessarily as persons, but as beings, as part of animal kingdom, as the animal rationale, as Aristotle comes up with the definition of it, and would even use the words instead of like we, people of faith, us, people of faith, would say for the beginning of us, creation. They would use another more scientific word from Latin language, fulguration, from fulgus, that lightning rod, because it happened so quickly in the history of development of our family of humans that we were suddenly become aware of ourselves. In other words, we developed that abstract thinking and our vocal cords can be connected, and the moment they glitched, that process that happened so quickly, we call it fulguration, like fulgus, like lightning in the scale of the universe, enabled us to think critically and put it on writing, express it. That speed up everything. That sped up everything. That's why that process that originated between, let's say, Pliocene and Pleistocene geological, historical eras, you know, between maybe 2.5 million years ago to 800,000 years ago, between that time, between Mesolithic age, era, something happened to our family that gave us possibility, potential of becoming of who we are now. And now most contemporary, as we call them, theory of evolution or new evolutionary synthesis, speak more specifically about the ways how it possibly happened. Not why, but how it happened. And that gives beautiful, beautiful discussion. I hope you might even do this to yourself, to your children, to your friends, about something that in our even religious tradition is known as the discussion between polygenists and monogenists. Polygenesis, do we come as human beings from many parents, many individual couples, or just from one couple, monogenesis? From one couple, as the sacred scriptures would like to say, Adam and Eve. In other words, is the theory, story, scientifically now being proven of mitochondrial or mitochondrial Eve and chromosomal with Y chromosome Adam, proves or not? Is it old as millions years back into the past, or is it just several 100,000? How you can trace those little chromosomes or mitochondrial material that is present only in female nucleus, and then make some statements about this. Fascinating journey. But you see, from scientific perspective, we can say about ourselves, not necessarily drawing a conclusion, we are persons, because that implies an entire, completely new level of our existence, that animals, even primates, don't share with us. You see, that's how we escape that category of natural kingdom, kingdom of nature. How beautifully Christian, Catholic theologians, religious thinkers, or even scientists would say, we're not there yet. As Jesus says on the pages of the gospel, we'll be sitting on the fence with one leg in kingdom of nature. We belong here. We are part of this Mother Earth. But Jesus says, I have future for you that eye has not seen and ear has not heard of. I prepared a place for you, and I will come back and take you to myself. We are making that leap over the fence, but we are not angels yet. We are not fiery ones, angelic creatures, new dimension of life that Jesus prepared for us. Is this a process? You see, as a glimpse of how we can philosophize about human beings becoming maybe human person. From philosophical perspective though, my friends, and maybe that's why we call it the Jesus Meets Aristotle series of philosophy lectures, I think on top of the old philosophical schools of Plato and Aristotle, when we maybe call ourselves animal rationale, rational animal, we see how from that ancient perspective we can go to maybe more precise scholastic method of how St. Thomas Aquinas, modified a little bit Aristotelian helomorphic theory, and I think gives most concise, precise, and then maybe somehow quasi-easy to understand way of who we are. You see, according to Aristotle, everything that you can see, you and I included, are built or made of two components, matter and form, helomorphe. That is the substance, that is you, makes you you. But Thomas, while reading the book of Exodus, and especially chapter 6 to 9, the story of, how Moses, the main character of the book of Exodus, experiences the deity, the Almighty Father, father of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, Moses' ancestors, speaks to Moses, and then how the dialogue goes when Moses asks the Almighty, what is your name then? God does not really reveal his name to Moses, but reveals something that Thomas would have his aha moment about God, about reading the Bible. Almighty reveals to Moses something that Thomas would use in modifying Aristotelian model of existence. Precisely the word existence is what was missing. Thomas says God reveals on the pages of the scripture, and to me personally, that he exists. Not like you and I, completely different way of existence. But the truth that he was, he is, and he always will be. That's what he says to Moses, you see, on those pages of the book of Genesis. Thomas takes and elaborates on. The essence of God is existence. The substance of God is existence. They go together. Existence and substance of God are one. Existence and substance in God is the same. You cannot divide those. Distinct those, really. And that's modification, that even though that beautiful concept of matter and form being a substance, you, what makes you, requires existence to be real. Because we can think of things, you see, like squared circles, and they exist in our head, in our mind even, but they're not for real. They lack existence in real world. You see, that Thomas's modification, when you think of it, of me, of you, matter, hyle, my form, and then form would be my immortal soul, makes the substance of me, essence of me, what makes me me, individual, unique, only you see? John, you are made of your genetic material, your skin, your tendons, your veins, your muscles, your body, physical body, that's your matter, but also of your, as you see that where Catholic understanding of it, subtle, very religious thinking of the immortal soul comes and takes the place of form in that Aristotelian model, modified by Thomas. And Thomas says that's your substance. That makes you unique, you, those two components, your essence, your Johnness. But then yet, in order for you to be, in the sense of ontological being, ens, an entis, being, it, you need to exist. And that's the God's component in this whole thing, you see. Existence added by Thomas to this entire process of philosophizing of who am I, gives indication that what eventually Thomas elaborates from early medieval, late antiquity philosopher Boethius, that we are, you are and I am, individual substantia of rationalis natura, individual substance of rational nature. You see, close to Aristotelian animal rationale, rational animal, but it speaks about two more elements that Aristotle don't, or speaks about in different ways. And you see, that gives us a little bit better of understanding of who we are, from philosophical perspective, defining that human person, human being, what is the definition, vision of it. And then maybe, just as an example, we can go and see how maybe more of the contemporary philosophies speak about or define us, human beings, as person, which is existentialism. Philosophical school or way of thinking that originated, as we mentioned in the opening statements, with Soren Kierkegaard, philosopher, but also religious person, thinker, who dies only in his 40s, very young, but produced for us some essays, some books, some ideas that completely changed the way we think about stuff, about ourselves and the universe. What I experienced, what I lived through, blood and sweat and pain and laughter and joy, being born and dying matters. It is important. It can be an object of philosophical critical thinking, not only ideal entities of goodness, bonum, beauty, pulchrum, morality, even God, theology. No, me, I matter. And when I develop, discover, understand myself more, better, only then I tremble. You see, it's that angst, fear, which is more of a trembling before God of how powerful, how omnipotent, how beautiful that God is. That out of trembling, out of that angst, experience of me, I still find myself significant. Not only completely ready to be cancelled, like today culture, cancel everyone you don't like. No, you matter. Because of that blood, of that drop of tear, of that sweat, of that laughter, of that smile, of that helping hand, of everything, especially when you do it to others. That's positive, you see, existentialism. Positive. Kierkegaard with his famous Either Or, famous 2-volume book. But also maybe Martin Heidegger with his maybe understanding of us living or being unto death. In his Time and Being, very thick, very important book, Martin Heidegger experiences and explains some of his ideas. But then maybe 2 philosophers that I love the most, and I really try to understand them a little bit better, which is Max Scheler with his idea of moral life. Yeah, we are this and that, soul and body, or just materials, just atoms, and we can talk about our psychosomatic experiences and sciences, but also I am a creature. That means I love, I fear, I can be altruistic. You see, those components, how Max Scheler adds them to philosophical distinctions, are valid. Without those, you can't really comprehend, express, or talk about, define human being as a person. Forget child of God, that's another dimension, but you see, on that philosophical level. Or very negative existentialism, very negative, that goes maybe, or drives from nihilism by Friedrich Nietzsche. Forget his psychological imbalance and then maybe some of the problems he dealt with as human being. God forbid many of us would go through what he did. God forbid. Hope we never would. But how he came up with those ideas of Dionysus, Apollonius, and 2 ways of living, you know, that eventually mingles into nihilistic way of whatever. Sounds familiar? How when you ask your child or teenager, the first initial wave of response is, whatever. Whatever. Hello? That's not nihilism. That's you and I, mom and dad, mom and child, working this life to be better, become better. Whatever, won't work. Philosophy, negative, by maybe Jean-Paul Sartre, and his understanding of being into nothingness. No matter what you do, you just you just die, nothing else. So then maybe his female friend or counterpart, or maybe along with Albert Camus or some other negative existential thinker, Simone de Beauvoir, would say only hedonism really matters. Use as much as you can pleasures of this life because there's nothing else. Really? But that's philosophy, philosophical questioning, understanding of who am I as a human person, to deeply, or maybe on another level, to understand and philosophize about a little bit of the aspects of who am I. And then from a religious perspective, religiously speaking, you see, from ancient mythogonies, those ideas that we were just put on here or there by like Olympian gods and goddesses, Greek understandings, and even predating Greeks, some even from when you go back to Nathufian cultures of, let's say, Neolithic Revolution, when then sedentarism, when people settle instead of wandering the deserts from oasis to oasis for food, nutrition and water, and they started to build cities and then develop agriculture, they still would conceive, comprehend, understand forces of nature as gods and goddesses, couldn't understand them better, explain them. And from those mythogonies, we would go to mythologies, and eventually from polytheistic understanding, worshipping or being in awe of many gods and goddesses, to monolatrism, which is a little different than monotheism. Monolatrism, yes, we worship one God, like maybe even Yahweh, but there are other gods, so we better light the candle to God, but a little smaller one to devil. You know what I mean? It's still present in our culture. That's why we need to see how from that monolatry we really have to be faithful to 10 commandments of monotheism, monotheistic religion, of Judaism, Moses, and Old Testament and New Testament of Jesus. How he fulfills those 10 commandments with one perfect commandment of, remember, love. Love one another. So when people look at you, they could say, look, they love each other genuinely, really. They come from me. And from that religious perspectives, I think we also can see, even from our own ongoing formation, that revelation fulfilled in the person of Jesus, fulfilling the Old Testament and offering us new in his life and blood, New Testament, we see that process of us becoming persons still happens. Jesus sealed that process when we add a little bit of the religion, especially Catholic Christian religion, into science, philosophy, what have you. We can see seal of Jesus from that cross, from his resurrection, on everyone who is part of this process of becoming. Many of you who might have reservations toward modernistic way of thinking, or even maybe more open philosophers of Jesuit school, let's say, for instance, Catholic philosophers and scientists like Teilhard de Chardin, might not agree with that, but I think his concept of point alpha and point omega is very valid. His concept of how we are still in the process of evolving toward God still happens. From philosophical perspective, one of my famous philosophers, Albert Northern Whitehead, would say this about his philosophy of process in his books and his research, that we are not done yet, so to speak. We still have potential to become the best version of ourselves. Now, some of the famous books that I would like to maybe share with you now, and I've been reading for years now, and hopefully maybe we'll offer the next section, the next segment, the next class on those, are those three. The first one would be this one. Those of you who are not familiar with Russian will have a difficult time reading it, but it says Idiot in Russian by Fyodor Dostoevsky. A novel that is a little long, a little thick, but I think it's the best of Dostoevsky. It's not even Brothers Karamazov, it's not even Crime and Punishment. I think this one, Idiot, is very, very famous and the best novel wrote by him. It pertains so much to what we talk about because I think it is a philosophical novel, although full of drama. But when you think about the concept of the gentleman, Prince Myshkin, who is the main character of the book, with, of course, Anastasia Filipovna and all the others, how this pure man, crafted by Dostoevsky, man of no fault, no guilt, no evil, just goodness, idealistic man, is called by everyone around him idiot. Idiot, you don't belong to the world of corruption, lies, money, and all those businesses going behind it. You're just an idiot. Antithesis of Christ. Dostoevsky portrays him, I feel, somehow like a little Christ-like figure in that book. You see the point, my friends? How we can read something nice, something beautiful like that novel, and still draw our own conclusions? Things have not changed over 150 years much from Dostoevsky's time. Everyone who wants to be Christ-like today is an idiot in this culture. And those two, one, my friends, is a very famous one. I'm not bragging about this, but I think every single one of us, especially here in the United States of America now, should familiarize ourselves with this little booklet, which is called Communist Manifesto, by those two famous gentlemen, Karl Marx actually. Why? Because when you open it, when you read it, toward the end of the booklet, it has some measures, or I call them, like in the maybe groups like support groups like AA. It's 10 steps to achieve a communist revolution in any given country. And my friends, I think we are here in Western world at step number 9 of 10. So maybe it's a good time to get familiar with that booklet, and that's why I'd like to offer the next class, next talk, on Communist Manifesto and antidote to it by this gentleman, part of existential philosophy, Gabriel Marcel, and one of his famous books is this metaphysical journal of Homo Viator, the wanderer, being human as the one who journeys all the time, wanderer. And then how essentially this French philosopher brings the ideas of altruism, positive thinking, and then me and you being valid and absolutely not only open-ended, but very valuable parts of experience of humanity. Maybe we can develop some of those topics, my friends, as we meet again. But what I'd like to say toward the end of this class about maybe this Copernican revolution in philosophy is, don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of asking bigger questions. Sometimes with a small steps that would lead you, hopefully, to build in your apparatus, in your mind, in your heart, and in your soul, entire library and then lab of methodology of how to talk, speak, see the real objective truth, and maybe even from time to time fight for it, because I do believe it's under assault, it's dissipating from our own eyes. And then being a religious person, in addition to some objective, very philosophical aspects of how truth is disappearing in front of us, as a religious person, I think, and I can only attest to it by the words of Jesus, that he says on the pages of his gospel, I am the truth. I am the life. You see, he says, I am the truth. Not, I am one of the many truths. I am some of the truths that you can check out and follow or not, what have you. I am the truth. You see? And then, only then we can understand how and why we call Jesus and second person of the Holy Trinity, the Word of God, Messiah, how he fulfills all the desires and prophecies of old ancient Jewish people, and how now we are encouraged by his gospel, good news, to live lives, to also transcend us, to achieve that kingdom of God, being with him forever and going up instead of falling down. I hope you will find those topics, those questions, those presentations interesting. For the next part, I invite you in a couple of days or a week, hopefully we'll be able to do this weekly, and then we'll talk about the Communist Manifesto and some ideas of socialism and communism, an antidote for it from existential personalistic philosophy of Gabriel Marcel. Thank you very much. God bless you.